Hey guys, welcome back to the storage facility. We are here for a couple reasons. A few reasons. One, I was dropping off some newly acquired or recently acquired sets to make room in the house because things are getting a little bit overwhelming. Also wanted to take a look at potential chassis for that ATS-30. See, I'd mentioned I had some other sets. Use that same chassis. Here's one of them. It's a 630 TS. One of these I was basically given a guy who was moving to the West Coast and had started doing some restoration projects and didn't finish them or didn't even start them. So that's one of these. And one of these I bought from a guy who thought that he would restore with the help of his grandfather. That never happened, so he I guess sold it to me or gave it to me, I don't recall. And the third one is the first vintage TV I ever got. And that's it way back there with the stand. If you go back through all my over 1,000 videos, you can find bits and pieces about these sets, but just very briefly. That is the cabinet and the stand for the very first vintage TV I ever got, a 630 TS. However, the chassis that's in it is one of the others I got. The original chassis that goes with that cabinet, I haven't restored yet. It might be that one. What I'm getting at with these is one of these, I think it's that one, it's a pretty rough cabinet. And one of these sets is missing the correct top, which I would expect is this one. So rather than restore a mismatched, rough 630 TS, I could take the chassis out and put it in the ATS-30. Just an option. Or I could take that nasty chassis that's in the 630 or ATS-30 and combine it with the nasty 630 TS mismatched cabinet. Anyways, we have options. But that's not the main reason. Those aren't the main reasons I'm here. The main reasons I'm here is to talk Emerson. See, I have a number of Emerson TVs, none of which I've restored, some of which you guys have never seen. One of them is down here, and that is a classic 10-inch Bakelite Emerson. And that came with my Dumont Clifton. It was part of the auction lot, and I had to take it whether I wanted it or not. Very cool set. I'm glad I had it. I used to actually have two of these, but one of them I sold. This one I still have. I've never done anything to it. The others are buried a bit deeper. One of them is coming home with me. Here's a better look at that Bakelite Emerson, and next to it is another Emerson, which I acquired, a few years ago in a house, one of those houses that you could order out of the Sears catalog. So I finally got to actually walk around inside of one. Very modest, out in a more rural area. Well, squirreled away in the house, were a bunch of vintage TVs, like in the attic. Like every TV that family had ever owned was still on the property. House was being sold. It was kind of an estate sale, Craigslist kind of thing, and I ended up taking most of the sets. This is one of them. This is in a gorgeous Ingram-designed cabinet with gorgeous wood, and it has a built-in radio. I did talk about this a bit. We looked at the chassis a while ago. I'll try to remember to put a link in the video. So that is Emerson number 2. Here are the other 2 Emersons, and this is one that's coming back with me. This relates to a post I made recently where I dug up an old service invoice. This, I'm pretty darn sure, is the set that goes with that invoice. I've never opened this up. I'll tell you the tale about the backstory. Actually, I got both of these sets at the same time from the same person. It's an interesting story, I think. I will tell it when I have my better camera on a tripod back at my place. but it directly relates to service shops and things to watch out for, and such. This one, I did do a video on when I got it. Let me back things up a little bit so you can actually see it a bit. So I brought both these sets back home at the same time. This one I did open up, and this one I did get working with a minimum amount of effort. This one, I don't remember even looking inside of this set. All of these Emersons are classic, very cool designs. They did things a bit their own way, especially this set. It has a very unique power supply to it. But what's also curious is it uses RCA knobs, exactly the same as in the 621 or 630, including that very distinctive channel selector. But everything else is pretty sure it's their own design. Holy crap. I forgot how heavy that set is. Man, I must have gotten it 10 years ago. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I put it into the storage locker. Man, I even managed to jack myself up a little bit. Wow. That's got to be 80 pounds, maybe more. Which is all the more bizarre because I think it's a transformerless set. Oh, the chassis did evolve a bit over time, but man. Whew. So, let's talk about this a little bit more while I'm still here while I catch my breath. The set is certainly uncommon, if not rare. It's one of their first TVs they put on the market post-war. It might have been their first tabletop set post-war. 10-inch black and white set. Very nice cabinet, as Emerson tended to do. Sometimes their electronics weren't so hot, especially as time went on. But certainly their earlier sets, they made nice cabinets. That Ingram one I showed you, that's when they outsourced to somebody else. But the cabinets they did more in-house are pretty nice. Yeah, it's got some damage, unfortunately. Some packing tape that was on it at some point. We can get that out. The rest of this, yeah, we could throw on some Howard's Restore finish. It might help a little. Could throw on a fresh coat of lacquer or two, sand it down. That would help a little. I certainly don't want to refinish it. That color and that patina, that would be tough to reproduce. Really, the damage seems to be pretty well isolated at the top. So, all right, let's get this in the car, get it home, get a Band-Aid on my hand. The set has arrived home safely in one piece. Because of its weight, I'm going to try something a little bit different, and that's making use of this vintage TV table I picked up a while ago that has a Lazy Susan built into the top. Even so, the weight is straining this table a little bit. It's funny, previously there had been an Admiral 12-inch set, about 1 year newer than this, a larger set, weighed probably half or 2/3 of what this set weighs. Alright, so I mentioned there was some backstory. We got to work through it because it's part of the tale of this TV. When I first started collecting TVs, I didn't really know where this hobby was going to head. But at some point I realized, okay, I have more than I want or need or have space for. So I started selling restored sets. Especially before we moved into the new house, because I didn't want to have to take them with me. So I started listing some of the more desirable sets on eBay and did pretty well with selling them. But when it came to some of the larger, more fragile sets, I had to list them as local pickup only. In this case, it was a 10-inch Admiral Bakelite tabletop TV, similar size to this. Weighed a little bit less, but more fragile, so to speak, because of the Bakelite cabinet. Inside the chassis is about the same level of fragility, but being Bakelite, I didn't want it. Plus, it would have cost a fortune. At any rate, I only got one bid. Not too surprising, because once you go local pickup, you're really reducing your audience. So I just got my opening bid price, which I'm a little disappointed by, but so be it. I mean, I set the price, so you just got to live with it. What I wasn't expecting is that the buyer said that he really didn't think he'd be able to come pick it up, and he asked me if I could deliver it. Turns out he was in Milwaukee, which is about a 90-plus minute drive. Wasn't crazy about it, but he said, hey, I've got a couple old vintage TVs that you could have in exchange for delivering it. As best I can remember, this is about 10 years ago. So I hesitantly agreed. I was trying to downsize, not pick up more TVs and trade for one, but he showed me some pictures and they looked pretty. And they were sets I hadn't seen before, so I thought, okay. Now, he used these TVs for his daily drivers. He watched them regularly. And that's why he wanted to buy a restored set, because he was just going to fire it up and start watching it. But what turned me off on the deal was he had a local guy. Again, as best as I can remember, it was somebody who had been a TV tech for years that was semi-retired and running a little side business. So a step above a hobbyist. It was officially a business with paperwork and itemized and labor and parts and all that stuff. Well, he had been going to this guy to keep his two Emersons running. And he spent quite a bit of money doing it. And one by one, the two sets were both written off as being either not possible to repair or not practical to repair. So when I got there, he tried to convince me that, hey, I've spent hundreds of dollars keeping these sets running. They're pretty. So he was trying to get me to buy them from him rather than to trade them to me for hand delivering his new set. He wanted me to buy them off him. I said, hey, you kind of soured the deal by telling me that a professional tech said that they can't be fixed or they're not worth fixing, which really lowers the value to me. So we ended up just making it a wash. He gave me the two sets. Maybe I gave him 20 or 50 bucks. I don't quite remember. But anyways, I got the two Emersons home. Now, the other set, I did a video on when I got it back home. And I will include it in the link. It's not the greatest video. I think I did it on my back porch at the old apartment. But I very quickly got that set working. And I reviewed the work that was done to it, and I was not impressed. So I'm very curious to see what is going on inside of this set. Let's talk about the set a little bit more, and then I want to go through a packet of paperwork that was given to me along with the set, including an invoice for repair work. If you're not familiar with Emerson, I'm not that familiar with Emerson, but I know that they were a fairly big player early on, pre-war into post-war. Apparently they were based out of New York. I thought they were maybe out of Pennsylvania or Ohio or something, but it pretty clearly says New York right on the official service info published by Emerson. And they did some unusual sets early on. They actually, I think, did a mirror in the lid set post-war, which is pretty unusual. They did some rear projection sets using that protogram system like the Duo View. And they made pretty cabinets. Some of them, as I showed in the storage unit, they outsourced to Ingram, and they had a series of really pretty radios as well that are rather collectible. And I've done some Emerson radios in the past. Quality-wise, I think they were kind of middle of the pack. But some of their early TVs were pretty darn well made. And part of it, I think, is because they borrowed from other manufacturers. For example, these knobs, these sure look like RCA knobs to me. They may very well have licensed some of the technology from RCA. I'm not sure if they made the cabinet or outsourced it, but it's really nice. It has some condition issues, as I mentioned, but I think we can work through that. And aside from the scuffs, and from what I can see from the outside, it's all here, including the back. That's all rather nice condition. And as you can see, he was using it. He's got his 75 to 300 ohm converter there. Perforated metal back. Just a tiny label here, model 750. Serial number, not present. It says 105 to 125 volts, which is a heck of a wide range. And 285 watts. So definitely power hungry. I think there are 28 tubes in this, and it might have a ballast tube. There were a couple production runs with some variations in the design, so I'm not entirely sure what flavor this one is. And this is all I know. This is as far as I've gotten. I've never taken the back off, never looked inside. What I do know is from looking at the service info, that's how I know it has some bizarre features. One of them I'll get to right now. You can't see it too well, but right behind the screen here, there are 5 25, I think it's Z5 or Z6 rectifier tubes. Yeah, 5 rectifier tubes. And there's no power transformer. This is a, like the early RCAs, it's a complicated design using both positive and negative B- rails to produce a really good picture that allows you more design flexibility with going through your IF stages, with being able to preserve a lot of signal bandwidth. And it has features that were somewhat common on early TVs, but were quickly phased out, which is centering controls, horizontal and vertical centering. They do that by applying a small DC bias to the deflection yoke. Later sets had, on the focus coil, would have a gimbal mount, and you'd have to monkey around with it, or centering rings, it had magnets you'd slide around to center the picture. Now on these, it's 2 potentiometers, and you put a DC bias in the yoke, everything else is fixed and solid, which is really nice to have, but it makes the design much more complicated. And the ballast tube, it may have that because there are 2 series strings of tubes, I believe, maybe 3. And all the tube filaments don't add up to the full line voltage, so they made up the difference with the ballast. Whether it's a bunch of power resistors mounted somewhere or an actual ballast tube, that I'm not positive. Alright, let's take a look at the paperwork and some service info, and then we'll look inside. The original service manual, as well as 2 different editions of Sam's Photo Fact, are all freely available for download at the Early Television Museum website. Unfortunately, the Emerson scan is not the greatest. It's really hard because it was done on either the paper had yellowed or was tinted paper to begin with, and I just have a laser printer, so I printed it out in grayscale, and it's really hard to read. But here briefly are all the rectifier tubes, and that is the ballast device. The rest of it is relatively conventional, I believe. So that's a revision 1 schematic. I think the second one might be a little more legible. But it's very comprehensive, and regardless of whether it's legible or not, at least we have a resistance reading and voltage reading and all sorts of waveforms and whatnot. Alright, the revision 2 is even harder to read, so we'll just skip that. But I printed out the SAMs. Now there are 2 SAMs. I printed out the earlier one, which I think matches my set better. And we can definitely get a better look at this. Oh, I shouldn't say it doesn't have a power transformer. It sort of does. It has a power transformer just for the filament for some of the tubes. Oh, I was wrong about that. Okay. I thought that the rectifiers went right off the AC line. They kind of almost do, but no, there's an autoformer sort of on the primary. So this must boost the voltage, line voltage a little bit. Okay, there's some of the tube filaments. Here's all our rectifiers. There are a lot of electrolytic caps in this at 80 microfarad, 80 microfarad, 80 microfarad, 80 microfarad, 80 microfarad. 80, 80, 80. I think there are a dozen 80 microfarad caps in this set, plus a host of other electrolytic caps. It's a little crazy. Beyond that, it's fairly conventional for an early design. A lot of tubes. I think we have 6H6 for a detector. That's a little unusual. We have 3 IF stages, split sound. So after 1 common stage on the IF, we have up on the top here is the sound IF, and then below that is the video IF. There's DC restoration, 6K6 audio output tube, 5V4 reaction damper. It's Which some sets used for the early design before there were really special purpose damper tubes available. A lot of early TVs used a 5V4 rectifier tube, and here are those centering controls. You see the yoke goes right to this vertical center control, and there's a horizontal, which provides us that bias. And a hallmark of the sets of the bias control is they have 1,000 microfarad or larger caps on them, because you cannot have any ripple whatsoever, and that bias voltage or your screen or your image is going to wiggle. Okay, let's take a look at what was supplied with me by the previous owner. So the previous owner provided me a pile of paperwork. Now, I don't want to call anybody out or disparage anybody about the amount that was charged or whatnot. I just found it very curious, because this has been a topic discussion both in a recent panel and just behind the scenes between me and myself and other restorers, is how much should we charge? What's fair to charge? What can the market bear? Now, none of us that were on that discussion panel recently do this for a living, and I don't want to. And I was warned on that early on, because once you do, it really changes it. It can very quickly no longer become fun, because you have to earn a living. You have to itemize everything, and at the end of the month, you got to pay all your bills. I don't. I work daytime as a programmer. It's totally a side gig. And when I started doing this, I was charging a flat rate, $300, $350. Just going to put it right out there. That's about what I was charging. Yeah, to restore a predicted TV, $300, $350. And I wouldn't itemize anything. I'd just say, here you go. Because I was doing it for friends. I was doing it for local collectors that couldn't find anybody else, that were kind of desperate, or a few folks, it was a family heirloom and they really wanted it to work. As times has gone on and I've been getting more and more business, I'm starting to, run it like a business and starting to itemize stuff and actually adding it up, and I'm charging more depending on the project. It's no longer a flat rate per project. So somebody just asked me a comment when I posted this invoice of like, well, what would you have charged for those repairs? So that's another weird thing, is I don't do repairs, and I don't want to. A set that's this old, if I want to give it back to somebody and say, here you go, plug it in and use it, I need to overhaul it. I'm just not going to find the smoking gun of the one part that's burned up and replace that and give it back to them. I'm going to go through everything, which means, and if that's not what you want, then find somebody else. Because if I'm going to put my name on it and say I repaired this, restored this, and it's good to go, I need to do it my way. Sorry, but that's just the way it is. But for what it's worth, now this gentleman who did this may not even be with us anymore, and he very likely had been running things as a business maybe his whole life or for decades, and this is his way of doing things, and so be it. There are very few people left in the country that do any of this work, so. Anyways, I just thought this was curious. So he itemized some tubes. He replaced one of the 25 Z6s, one of the 5V4, a coil. I can't find that part number or cross-reference anywhere in the Sam's or the Emerson. I don't know what an X31171 coil is, but $25. Basically, he charged about the same at $21, $24.90, $24.80 for these parts. I have no idea where those prices came from. I just looked up now. You can get a new old stock 25Z6 for $350. So I don't know where $21 came from. 3 SP Resisto pack. I don't know if that's 3 resistors, 3 packs of resistors. I don't know, but it was $18. Brightness control, $31.45. Vertical linearity control, $26.50. Those haven't been made in decades. I don't know where he might have gotten them. I don't know where those prices came from, but $151.65 in parts. Then there's some light items here. 5V4 25Z6 alignment, $20. I don't know what the heck that means. And maybe these columns don't have anything to do with it. He included, I saw this earlier, these are some notes about operating the set. I'm just curious because The name on these notes is not the same as the name on the service invoice. It's also not the same as the name of the guy in Florida who might have sold that set, so I don't know who produced these. But I agree with everything he says. Allow it to warm 5 to 10 minutes to warm up. If you have a lot of text or graphics, it's going to overload it. You can buzz in the audio. Now, this was curious too, because people ask me this, like, how often can I run it? This gentleman suggested limit your usage to maybe 2 hours per month. I do disagree with this about nearly impossible to find a replacement. This is dated from 2012. That might have been just about when Scotty retired. But this is right about when you could actually still get it rebuilt. And 10BP4, which is what this uses, they're you can get one for $50 at the museum. They're not. It's the most common vintage picture tube. Well, this is the printout of the Sam's Photo Facts. Alright. I think this is taped. This is the full Sam's Photo Fact taped up. Alright, so I suspect, or I assume, whenever somebody worked on this, whoever worked on this, highlighted all the stuff that he checked. I have no idea what his color coding meant or what the circling is, but we can verify that against the set. We can see is the stuff that was circled, did those parts get replaced? I would assume green means good. All the electrolytics, though, are marked in yellow. Does that mean he tested them and they were okay? Does green mean he tested the tubes that were okay? There are no tubes that aren't green. There are no caps that aren't yellow. So, I don't know. Stuff I printed out. Okay, so that's all we know. That's all we know. I will look at those photos more closely, so we may or may not have gotten this set from Florida. Somebody did work on it at some point, and at some point it stopped working, and the owner or his repairman or together decided it couldn't be fixed or it wasn't worth fixing. I will fix it. I will get it working. I can guarantee you that. And I'm not saying I will get it working out of arrogance. I'm saying I will get it working because I will go above and beyond. I'm willing to spend money and do what I have to do to get parts if any are needed. And I have spare parts on hand for a lot of this stuff, that's all. Bummer there's a chip on the cabinet. At least it's way in the back at the bottom corner where it's not so visible. Alright, let's pop this back off. So Lazy Susan definitely is going to be crucial for working on this set. I wish it turned a little bit better. I did a video on this ages ago when I got it. The rollers is just running on wood. So it's metal on wood. That's why it's a little, well, not so smooth. I could improve the design if I really was so inclined. Beef it up. Or even just replace the entire thing with a metal on metal Lazy Susan assembly. Or heck, make your own. I mean, just get any small table at a thrift store, get a hunk of plywood, put a Lazy Susan between the two, and there you go. That's really all this is. But I'll tell you what, for working on a heavy set, that's nice. Be able to swing it around. I think that's the last of it. So I didn't get a power cord, but it looks like just a conventional non-polarized cord would fit right in there. Oh, I thought just the... Huh. Okay, so it's a wood and metal back. Interesting aroma. It's old, but it smells kind of nice, almost like some kind of nice wood. Alrighty, there's all our tubes. One thing I was curious is, it says they replaced one of them. Can we identify it? This one has some writing on it. So that's interesting. This comes off. Okay, so Oh, that power transformer is a little bit beefy. I wonder if that transformer does power all the tube filaments. Or maybe that autoformer does have a lot going on with it. I don't know. Are these what I think they are? Sure looks like it. Wow. What a strange design. I think those are can-dome resistors. Those are power resistors mounted to this metal for heat dissipation. Those might be some of the ballast resistors on the high voltage cage back. I said this was going to be different. Now that's the kind of thing that would be, if you wanted to preserve the original look, that would be tough to replace. I don't make these anymore. And you can't restuff them. You can get modern chassis mount resistors, but the materials they use can take a lot more heat, so these might be only 20 watt resistors, or maybe they're 50 watt. But even a modern 50 watt resistor is going to be like this big, and it's not going to look like these. Just a few things jump out to me. The cable going to the CRT base has like lacing all around it, but I can't. Kind of looks like it might be modernish electrical tape. And wire insulation's a little odd too. Ooh, and it's kind of crunchy, so don't mess with that. It almost looks like plastic over cloth or something. Okay, the speaker's way up on that side. Twin lead. Twin lead got a bit melted. It must have come a little too... Oh, yeah. There's crud on these tubes. It's probably the melted twin lead. So this is one tube that has a little bit of writing on it. Oh, I got distracted here. This looks like it's insulation. This might be a hot chassis. Or it might be floating. But I'm thinking this was here so you won't touch it. Of course, all these controls are metal and they're mounted right to the chassis too. So it looks like there was some sort of instruction here, but it's kind of obliterated. I don't know if that's some goo that melted on the tube or if that was whoever working on it making a mark that he replaced it. Well, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4 of them look to be a matched set of RCA tubes, and one of them's a Sylvania. So, assuming that service info is accurate, I would guess this is the one that got replaced. It has no markings on it. I can't tell anything. Okay. I'm gonna... Ooh, it's been recapped. Well, we can forget about restuffing the original caps because they are gone. And the caps that are in there, well, let's just say it's not how I would have done it. For a closer tour. There aren't many of these sets around. I hesitate to call things rare, but it's certainly uncommon. I doubt they even made many of them. Oh, the AC interlock is polarized. I wonder if that's been replaced. It looks a little grungy. Looks clean. Really not much corrosion. Okay, so I'll just put the camera in here because I can barely see from where I'm at, but there are some new caps. So there should be, like, there originally were 8 or more can electrolytics in this area. I see what looks to be the remains of 1 and a couple new blue caps. So where are all the others? There should be like a dozen 80 microfarad caps. I'm guessing those are below. So this invoice we have is clearly not for that work. Which makes me wonder, if he charged that much to do a minimal amount of work, how much would he have charged to do like a full recap on this thing? Which would have been far more work. I mean, $1,000? I don't know. Hundreds, I'm sure. The rest of it looks super clean. No issues that I can see. Okay, gotta clear some more room and figure out how to get this thing out. probably will be tipping the chassis on its side. CRT is mounted to the chassis. Alright. Starting to take the set apart more, and you're going to be hearing me sigh a lot, and maybe even cursing a bit, because bit by bit I'm finding more things I don't like. Minor, yeah, but well, anyways. This knob, called a top hat knob, kind of rare, hard to come by. The fragile, and this one was broken, and just a horrible glue job. It doesn't even line up. The edge noticeably sticks out. There's glue slopped all over it. If it's identical to an RCA, I don't recall the RCAs. That was chipped up there. I don't recall RCAs having a set screw in them. For that matter, I don't even know if this did originally, or was that somebody add that? Because there should be a shim of spring steel in there to hold it in place. It looks like it might be gone. This is even worse than I initially realized. I think there's a number unglued. Anyways, that's kind of pathetic. And again, time is money. I mean, I don't know who did this or at what point. I mean, maybe this was done 70 years ago. I don't know. But if it was done in modern times, I gotta say, if you're not up to it, if you're not sure what kind of glue to use or how to set it up right or whatever, then don't do it. Put it in a baggie, put it inside the set, use a substitute or something like that. Occasionally these show up on eBay. Renovated radios makes reproductions, I think, for $50 a pop. Yeah, it's a bit of money, but it's also a very distinctive, notable feature of the set. The little notches where you see the channel numbers, and this set does have channel 1. For one of the most striking visual things you see in the set when you look at it from the front, at least clean up the excess glue on it. I mean, geez. What else? Okay, super minor thing. The bolts underneath, they don't match. I'm not even sure if they're all there. One of them at least was very loose. And I did sneak my camera in there and took a photo. I did not like what I saw. I'll give you a little peekaboo. Originally there were 9 caps here, all mounted above the chassis. There's only one left. The rest, some of them, it looks like rivets were drilled out and screwed, probably terminal strips mounted below. You can see at least one blue cap down below. Some of the insulating phenolic wafers are still there. Looks like there's only one original can left. You can see how most of them are insulated, so I figured I would use Adaptacaps on those. But it would have been nice to have the originals, because then possibly I could have used those covers over the ones that were there. Some of them had cardboard covers, which would have been easy to possibly get off the can and pop over it. Now, I do have a stash. I have a box of new old stock unused twist lock capacitors. I have maybe 100 of them or so. I might be able to... They wouldn't have the right value stamped on them, but if I really want to cosmetically make it look right, I could. But that's a minor thing. What I'm more concerned about is what am I going to find underneath? And some of these were multi-suction, so we're talking about over a dozen caps were relocated from the top to the bottom. What happened to the wiring? How many terminal strips were added? What kind of a mess am I going to have to sort out under there? Maybe it does work. Maybe electrically it does, but... I got to sort it all out, and I would like to put it back to the way it was originally, because I just ordered up a bunch of caps, and with the thought that I'd be mounting them all on top, and then I got the type that would all fit up here. Anyways, let's get this chassis out and see what else we got to deal with. Here's what I found holding the chassis, and 2 are probably the original, the ones with the washers. The other 2 are not, and none of them were tightened. I was able to get them all out with just my fingers. Well, that's not so good. Before I started the chassis out, I noticed something on the front here. There are a lot of fine scratches on the front here, and there's some color loss. I think somebody used maybe some steel wool or fine sandpaper and went over all this. Maybe with some wax or something, thinking they were doing some good. I don't know. This looks like it's all unmolested around here, but this inner part? Yeah, whatever. At least decals are in decent shape. Channel numbers are actually on a metal plate. Nice deco font. So we saw on the note there was a control replaced. That one is the odd man out. For one, it's a single knob, where the rest are all dual controls. But that's how it was originally, so it's just brightness. But this is aluminum, and the rest are all brass, which looks a little odd. Well, there she is. I didn't see any obvious way to disconnect the antenna terminal, so I disconnected it from the antenna, from the cabinet, and just took the whole thing out. It's melted, it's been spliced, and some red Glipdol painted on it. Who knows? CRT socket's kind of unusual too. So maybe the two pieces that snap together. I think you could maybe take this metal ring off and the two parts come apart. I don't know. That looks a little odd too. It's kind of like the mounting plate for a cap, but obviously there isn't one there. Alright, well, there's where the work was done. That might even be a new cap. Looks awfully shiny. Well, time to find out what's underneath. Okay, well, a few things right away. It's not been recapped in regards to the paper caps. What the F is that? It could be AFC diodes for the horizontal, or it's the video detector. Well, the video detector is supposed to use a 6H6, and maybe that's what used to be down there. And maybe this is a later revision that used solid state diodes. I mean, obviously this isn't original. One hell of a workaround that I'm going to have to decode. So this is what. So somebody paid. So the invoice we saw was just for a minimal amount of work. I don't know if the same guy did this work. It's terrible. And this is exactly what I was afraid of. So when people ask me, like, what would you have charged for this repair? I wouldn't have done this repair. Now, if you want to ask me, seriously, if I had to replace a couple tubes in a control and, you know, the rest of the work had been done nicely or was all in good shape, I would have charged less. But if this set as is showed up on my doorstep and somebody said make it work, I would probably charge more than if it was all original. Because I got to figure out what the hell did somebody do to this thing before I can even begin thinking about fixing it. And yeah, I mean, there's just shit all over the place. What is this? What is this? There's just stuff floating in free space. And that's what I was worried when I saw that so many caps were underneath, that they were going to be all over. Now, they're decent quality caps, assuming they're the right values and whatnot. In fact, they're overkill, because I just ordered up some new ones. So the centering controls, I mentioned they have 1,000 microfarad caps across them. That's what these are. They only need to be about 6 volts or 10 volts. These are 50 volt caps. These should all be 80s. Some of them look to be more like 100s. 450, that's fine. I don't recognize the brand. I don't know what these blue guys are. But what I don't like is seeing extension leads like that have no insulating tubing on them. Or wires attached like that. Oh, there we go. Great. These are not the most. These are not the most secure terminal strips. In that regard, it's not super horrible. Looks like they added 1, 2, at least 3 terminal strips that I can see. Some people are like, oh, why bother with adapter caps? There's always plenty of room. Just throw some terminal strips down below and throw the caps down below and leave the originals up above. This is, when you have to do a lot of caps, this is why I want to use the adapter caps. Get all the caps back up on top and leave all the wiring as it was originally going to all the lugs down below, or the points on the circuit boards that correspond to where the lugs used to be. Man, oh man. So what I have to hope on for now is that I have really accurate service info. I am not going to just assume that all this is right and works, reattach that wire, and plug it in. Especially that. I have never seen anything ever, even remotely like that. My best guess, without having looked at the service info, and just guess, because I saw that this used a 6AL5 dual diode for an AFC discriminator, I think it's called, to lock the horizontal oscillator. So that could be the horizontal blocking transformer, for the horizontal oscillator blocking transformer, and those are the AFC diodes, and that is the adjustable oscillator coil to set the frequency, maybe. So maybe the original horizontal blocking oscillator was dead, and maybe this was some kludge. Hey, maybe this was published in a service info 60 years ago as a workaround if you can't get the right transformer. I don't know. I don't know what I'm looking at. One thing I do know, if I'm looking at the service info and the SAMs, is under the columns for replacements from like Stancor or Merit, there's nothing. They just have the original Emerson part numbers. So I'll give them, whoever it is, a lot of leeway there. The original correct part may be nearly impossible to get. It seems more likely to be the horizontal oscillator than the video detector, because you wouldn't have this big transformer, and you would just need one diode for the video detector, I think. Although, like I said, it uses 6H6, so they might have used 6H6 as a dual diode. Typically, you just need a diode for the video detector, but the other diode might have been used for AGC. That's a possibility. I also got to say, I'm a little... regardless of the quality of work, it's still a lot of work. This would have taken a lot of effort to do. Why didn't they replace the paper caps? Or they'd replaced a couple, 3, 4. And obviously didn't have the right parts. Had to put extension leads here and there. Threw various electrolytics scattered around. Let's see, we get a date cut off these Nichicons maybe. 04/27, so maybe 2004, 27th week of 2004. That seems reasonable. In other words, this was done within the last 20 years. These parts are pretty modern, for the most part. Something like that, this Surcap, this it's got to be an old repair because there's a resistor just kind of hanging there. It's either, or it's a recent repair using an old part. I don't know. Wow, that's a tad disappointing. I gotta figure out what these guys are. 47 ohm, 22 watt. 47. It's like 47 ohm, 10-22. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, that's a 10 ohm, 20 watt. That one I can read. stinky wire. Insulation melted on it. Blah. It's tempting, but I don't think it would be wise for me to just clip all this out and then go from there. I'm not crazy about tracing this out either. Well, I think this is a good place to leave off. You've heard me rambling an awful lot, and here's the full reveal. And now I've got my homework to do. I'm going to order up all the caps going off the service info. Actually, I already did. I just submitted my order a few moments ago. I'll take it from there. I have some other projects to wrap up before I dig into this. I just wanted to know what I was in store for. So this is going to be something a little different. I was hoping this project would be a little different just in terms of the design and the early nature of it, but alrighty. I took a gander at the service info and parts placement diagram, and I think I know what that is. One, these two components I don't believe have any association to each other. I think that is possibly original. I think that is the sound ratio detector. It has a 6S8 tube right about there, which has 2 diodes and a triode. I'm thinking they are not using the 2 diodes in that anymore, and they're using these 2 diodes. And the ratio detector transformer went bad, couldn't find a replacement, and rigged up this new one, which is unshielded. And that strange looking opening on top is where the original ratio detector transformer was. I have some spares. I have no idea if they're compatible or not, but I'm hoping that's all it is. That's a lot easier to deal with than horizontal AFC, which I also looked up, and that uses a 6AL5 that's more over in this area, so I'm pretty confident that that is sound. And ratio detector circuits were super. Most TVs use them. I'm pretty sure I could find something that's compatible that we could mount up top and clean up this mess. I think this stuff is just hot glued together or something. Okay, one last thing. Let's test the picture tube. I almost forgot about that. Now, I'm curious to see how this tests because the service tech wrote in the paperwork that it was weak. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Alright. Well, filament's glowing. That's a good start. What do you think, Shadow? Yeah, I don't know about that too. Oh, thanks, Jupes. Then we got backup. High voltage covers a little got mangled or twisted or something. Alright, coming up we should have a half moon on the left side of both of these. Let's go over to emissions. Okay, that's not good. That's not good. No, I'm not entirely surprised because I know the previous owner watched this a lot. But I had to wiggle this to get the filament to glow, so maybe another element's not making good contact. That might be wishful thinking. Well, we will let it sit for a while. I'll bump things up to 7. And we'll come back in 15 minutes. It's been more like half an hour, and things improved, but not a whole lot. This is the least of my concerns. I can replace the CRT, and we can try rejuvenating it. So, I'm going to leave off here. This was a tad disappointing, but, well, as I started out this video saying, what it's going to be a journey. So I just placed my parts order. my goal is to use Adaptacaps because it's perfect for it. It has a smaller type, which I have some engineering samples for. So the larger ones have 4 lugs and the smaller ones have 3. I intend to repopulate all 9 of these with electrolytics and rewire the bottom to match the service info. And well, maybe it's not such a bad thing that most of the original paper caps are still there, so at least I can go through and do that pretty easily. So I want to do all that first, and I'll leave the sound to last. We'll just leave it as it is and assume that bodge job actually does something useful. Alright, that's going to be it for now. Thanks for watching. I'm curious to know your thoughts on this project.